Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I was just finishing up the last of my breakfast. Good morning. Hello, hi, how's everyone doing today? Hello, Cal. Hello, Claria. How are you guys doing today? Sorry, I was just finishing up the last of my breakfast while I was getting everything together. My computer decided it wanted to do an update, so that's why it took so long. But we're here. We're gonna continue reading some more Sherlock Holmes. I am excited. I am excited. Hold on, let me just. So my computer decided it wanted to update. So I was just waiting for that. So sorry for being late, but I'm here. Hero, hello, hello, hello. How are you guys doing today? Doing good? Good. I'm glad to hear that, Claria. Just give me a second to get my bearings together because I woke up very late. I woke up late and then my computer decided it wanted to update while I was getting myself ready for the day. So that took some time. Which Hemlock Holmes story is this time? Let's see. We're gonna tackle. Let me look at the index real quick. Let's see. We're gonna see if we can read the Reigate Squire and the Scandal in Bohemia today. See if we can get through those two stories for today. Get my glasses on so I can see. Just give me a second to just make sure everything is all updated. Oh, that's. Double checking everything. Sorry, just give me a second, you guys. Like I said, I woke up late. The computer decided to update, so I didn't get to do literally everything. Scandal of Bohemia has the funny in it, I believe, and also the woman. Interesting, interesting. Let me just let everyone know on Twitter I'm live. Oh, down. I've been slacking on my Twitter lately, and it makes me feel real bad. Like, I haven't been posting as much as I would like to, just because I've just been really enjoying doing things in the moment. So anytime I have like a thought or something, I kind of just ruminate on it rather than, you know, post it to the internet to let the world see my weird mind. But I don't know. I don't know. I haven't been social lately. I haven't been very social lately, so I haven't been feeling very social. And that's a me thing. It's a me thing. I have my moments, you know? Everyone has their moments when they don't want to be social or things like that. You know? So that's perfectly okay. It just means you gotta charge your social battery for a bit, you know? Perfectly normal. Hello, K. Sorry for being late. You are not late, Sarah. I am actually the one that is late. You are perfectly on time. Don't you worry. I just got here myself. Mostly because my computer decided. Well, I woke up late and then my computer decided it wanted to update. So while I was getting everything ready, so you know, it is what it is. It is what it is. I'm not gonna complain. So yeah, everything is now updated. I'm gonna have a sip of my coffee. I made bread. I had bread for breakfast. I made bread and I made bread yesterday and it came out really good. So I had some of that for breakfast. So I was making dinner last night and I had some like extra ingredients. So I was like, I don't want to waste this, so I'm gonna make bread, and I did, and it came out great. I made like what did I make last night? I made a chicken parm. I made a chicken parmesan with egg noodles and a butter sauce that has tomatoes, garlic, and basil, which was great. Nice and a very filling but not heavy dinner, which was nice. And then I made some bread, and then Creator came home last night from work and he brought brownies, so we had brownies for dessert, and it was really good. It was a great dinner, and I was so happy. And I was so happy. I actually feel proud of myself that my dinner came out really great last night. I posted a picture in the Discord and on Twitter, so if you haven't seen it, it came out really, really good. Because I also made the sauce for the chicken parm. I made the tomato sauce for the chicken parm, and it came out great. And I'm very proud of myself because I was very worried. I was very, very worried that it wouldn't come out right because I only used I didn't have very much in the kitchen. We have to go shopping. Creator's been so busy. I don't drive. It's been a bear to go to the supermarket. We gotta go do a big shop. So I made it with only what we had, and you know, it came out pretty good. Can't complain. Whether it made with anything special? No. It was just, let's see. With the chicken parm, it was just not breaded, like flour dredged chicken that I fried up. The sauce was just a container of crushed tomatoes with garlic, onion, some fresh parsley, some herbs. Not parsley, fresh basil, because I grow basil. I have a basil plant, and it's been growing like crazy. So I decided to use some of the leaves for my sauce. Some fresh herb, some fresh basil, along with the dried stuff that I have, because I would love to have a whole herb garden, but I don't have the space. Wrong, they were made with love. It was absolutely made with love. It was delicious, you know? It was absolutely delicious. It was all very easy. It was all very easy to make, too. It was a very, very simple dinner that was quick. Not quick, but easy to make, you know? It was very easy to make. Especially the pasta. The pasta took no time at all, because there were egg noodles, and egg noodles cook very quickly. Egg noodles, and then the sauce for the egg noodles was simple. It was just like 4 tablespoons of butter, maybe like an ounce, 2 ounces, a couple ounces of cherry tomatoes that've been chopped up, like quartered and sliced in halved and quartered. Like the bigger ones are quartered, the smaller ones in halved. Some roughly chopped garlic, some roughly chopped basil, a little bit of salt and pepper, and that was it. Very, very good. I cooked everything down until it was all nicely cooked but not mushy. Came out great. But yes, they were all made with love. It was all made with love. It was very good. 10 out of 10 would do it again. They were very good. But yes, enough of me talk about how I made my dinner, because that's only gonna make me hungry. But yes, let's get back into it. Let's get into the story time. I just wanted to talk a little bit because I wanted to catch up. Yesterday I didn't get to do the story time because I blame Cal. I blame Cal. We were playing Sucker for Love on his Twitch channel, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, but we kind of lost track of time a little bit, so I was like, you know what? We'll do the story time today, because I don't normally stream today, so it's fine. So a little bit of a scheduling conflict there, so. But I'm glad you guys are all here with me today. So, let's get into it! Let's get into it before I start. What the fuck? I absolutely am snitching you out. I am snitching you out. I blame you. But it was so much fun. I didn't even care. It was so much fun. It was so much fun, Cal. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed playing Sucker for Love. I still haven't. Well, I still have to look up those secret endings, so I will look those up later. I forgot to do so last night. Oh God, excuse me. I forgot to do so yesterday because I got real busy after what we hung out. So the fuck? No, Adobe, I don't care. Go away. I don't give a shit about your update. Go away. Alright, so let's get into it. But yes, I did snitch on you. But it was fun, so no regrets. Alright, let's get into the story time. Oof. Also, it's very humid and hot today. It's a very rainy day today, so it's kind of gross. So, Alright, the Reigate Squire. It was some time before the health of my friend, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, recovered from the strain caused by his immense exertions in the spring of '87. The whole question of the Netherlands Sumatra Company and of the colossal schemes of Baron Maupertuis is too recent in the minds of the public and too intimately concerned with politics and finance to be a fitting subject for this series of sketches. It led, however, in an indirect fashion to a singular and complex problem, which gave my friend an opportunity of demonstrating the value of a fresh weapon among the many with which he waged his lifelong battle against crime. On referring to my notes, I see that it was on the 14th of April that I received a telegram from Lyons, which informed me that Holmes was lying ill in the Hotel Dulong. Within 24 hours, I was in his sick room, and was relieved to find that there was nothing formidable in his symptoms. His iron constitution, however, had broken down under the strain of an investigation which had extended over 2 months, during which period he had never worked less than 15 hours a day, and had more than once, as he assured me, kept to his task for 5 days at a stretch. The triumphant issue of his labors could not save him from reaction after so terrible an exertion, and at a time when Europe was ringing with his name, and when his room was literally ankle-deep with congratulatory telegrams, I found him a prey to the blackest depression. Even the knowledge that he had succeeded where the police of 3 countries had failed, and that he had outmaneuvered at every point the most accomplished swindler in Europe, was insufficient to rouse him from his nervous prostration. Three days later, we were back in Baker Street together. But it was evident that my friend would be much the better for a change, and the thought of a week of springtime in the country was full of attraction to me also. My good friend, Colonel Hayter, who had come under my professional care in Afghanistan, has now taken a house near Reigate, in Surrey, and had frequently asked me to come down to him upon a visit. On the last occasion, he had remarked that if my friend would only come with me, he would be glad to extend his hospitality to him also. A little diplomacy was needed, but when Holmes understood that the establishment was a bachelor one, and that he would be allowed the fullest freedom, he fell in with my plans, and a week after our return from Lyons, we were under the Colonel's roof. Hayter was a fine old soldier, who had seen much of the world, and he soon found, as I had expected, that Holmes and he had plenty in common. On the evening of our arrival, we were sitting in the Colonel's gunroom after dinner. Holmes stretched upon the sofa, while Hayter and I looked over his little armory of firearms. "By the way," he said suddenly, "I think I'll take one of these pistols upstairs with me in case we have an alarm." "An alarm?" said I. "Yes, we've had a scare in this part lately. Old Acton, who is one of our county magnates, had his house broken into last Monday. No great damage done, but the fellows are still at large." "No clue?" asked Holmes, cocking his eye at the Colonel. "None as yet, but the affair is a petty one of our little country's crimes, which must seem too small for your attention, Mr. Holmes, after this great international affair." Holmes waved away the compliment, though his smile showed that it had pleased him. "Was there any..." Oop. Knocked into my water bottle. Was there any feature of interest? I fancy not. The thieves ransacked the library and got very little for their pains. The whole place was turned upside down, drawers burst open and presses ransacked, and the result that an odd volume of Pope's Homer, 2 plated candlesticks, an ivory letterweight, a small oak barometer, and a ball of twine are all that have vanished. What an extraordinary assortment, I exclaimed. Oh, the fellows evidently grabbed hold of anything they could get. Holmes grunted from the sofa. The county police ought to make something of that, he said. Why, it is surely obvious that... But I held up a warning finger. You are here for arrest, my dear fellow. For heaven's sake, don't get started on a new problem when your nerves are all in shreds. Holmes shrugged his shoulder with a glance of comic resignation towards the colonel, and the talk drifted away into less dangerous channels. It was destined, however, that all my professional caution should be wasted, for next morning the problem obtruded itself upon us in such a way that it was impossible to ignore it, and our country visit took a turn which neither of us could have anticipated. We were at breakfast when the colonel's butler rushed in with all his propriety shaken out of him. "Have you heard the news, sir?" he grasped. At the Cunninghams, sir." "Burglary?" cried the colonel, with his coffee cup in midair. "Murder!" The colonel whistled. "By Jove," he said. Who's killed them? Who's killed then? The J.P. or his son?" "Neither, sir. It was the William, the coachman. Shot through the heart, sir, and never spoke again." "Who shot him, then?" "The burglar, sir. He was off like a shot and got away clean. He just broke in at the pantry window when William came on him and met his end in saving his master's property." "What time?" "It was last night, sir, somewhere about 12. "Ah, then we'll step over presently," said the colonel, coolly sitting down to his breakfast again. "It's a baddish business," he added, when the butler had gone. "He's our leading squire about here, is old Cunningham, and a very decent fellow, too. He'll be cut up over this, for the man has been in his service for years, and was a good servant. It's evidently the same villains who broke into Acton's." "And stole that very singular collection?" said Holmes, thoughtfully. "Precisely." Excuse me. Excuse me. Allergies. It may prove the simplest matter in the world, but all the same, at first glance, this is just a little curious, is it not? A gang of burglars acting in the country might be expected to vary the scene of their operations, and not to crack 2 cribs in the same district within a few days. When you spoke last night of taking precautions, I remembered that it passed in my mind that this was probably the last parish in England to which the thief or thieves would be likely to turn their attention, which shows that I have still much to learn. "I fancy it's some local practitioner," said the colonel. "In that case, of course, Acton's and Cunningham's are just the places he would go for, so they are far the largest about here." "And the richest?" "Well, they ought to be. But they've had a lawsuit for some years which has sucked the blood out of both of them, I fancy. Old Acton's has some claim on half Cunningham's estate, and the lawyers have been at it with both hands. If it's a local villain, there should not be much difficulty in running him down," said Holmes with a yawn. "All right, Watson, I don't intend to meddle." "Inspector Forrester, sir," said the butler, throwing open the door. The official, a smart, keen-faced young fellow, stepped into the room. "Good morning, Colonel," he said. "I hope I don't intrude, but we hear that Mr. Holmes of Baker Street is here." The colonel waved his hand toward my friend, and the inspector bowed. "We thought that perhaps you would care to step across, Mr. Holmes." "The fates are against you, Watson," he said, laughing. "We were chatting about the matter when you came in, Inspector. Perhaps you can let us have a few details." As he leaned back in his chair with a familiar attitude, I knew that the case was hopeless. "We had no clue in the Acton affair, but here we have plenty to go on. and there's no doubt it is the same party in each case. The man was seen. Ah. Yes, sir. But he was off like a deer after the shot that killed poor William Kerwin. Poor William Kerwin was fired. Mr. Cunningham saw him from the bedroom window, and Mr. Alec Cunningham saw him from the back passage. It was 11:45 when the alarm broke out. Mr. Cunningham had just gone to bed, and Mr. Alec was smoking a pipe in his dressing gown. Both heard William, the coachman, calling for help, and Mr. Alec ran down to see what was the matter. The back door was open, and as he came to the foot of the stairs, he saw two men wrestling together outside. One of them fired a shot, the other dropped, and the murderer rushed across the garden and over the hedge. Mr. Cunningham looked out of his bedroom window, saw the fellow as he gained the road, but lost sight of him at once. Mr. Alec stopped to see the lock had been forced, when William came upon him. Did William say anything to his mother before going out? She is very old and deaf, and we could get no information from her. The shock has made her half-witted, but I understand that she was never very bright. There is one very important circumstance, however. Assuming that it is a point had upon the famous London specialist. Your last remark, said Holmes presently, found that there was a method in his madness. Some folks might say there was madness in his method, muttered the inspector. But he is all on fire to start, Colonel, so you had best go out, if you are ready. Excuse me. Excuse me. We found Holmes pacing up and down in the field, his chin sunk upon his breast and his hands thrust into his trouser pockets. The matter grows in interest, he said. Watson, your country trip has been a distinct success. I have had a charming morning. You've been up to the scene of the crime, I understand, said the colonel. Yes, the inspector and I have made quite a little reconnaissance together. Any success? Well, we have seen some very interesting things. I'll tell you what we did as we walk. First of all, we saw the body of this unfortunate man. He certainly died from a revolver wound, as reported. Had you doubted it then? Oh, it is well to test everything. Our inspection was not wasted. We then had an interview with Mr. Cunningham and his son, who were able to point out the exact spot where the murderer had broken through in the garden hedge. In his flight. That was of great interest. Hello, John! Welcome. Good morning. We are reading the Reigate Squire, Sherlock Holmes story by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I hope you're doing well today, and I hope you're enjoying the story, friends, so I hope you enjoy. Naturally. Then we had a look at this poor fellow's mother. We could get no information from her, however, as she is very old and feeble. And what is the result of your investigations? The conviction is that the crime is a very peculiar one. Perhaps our visit now may do something to make it less obscure. I think we are both agreed, Inspector, that the fragment of paper in the dead man's hands, bearing as it does the very hour of his death written upon it, is of extreme importance. It should give a clue, Mr. Holmes. It does give a clue. Whoever wrote that note was the man who brought William Kerwin out of his bed at that hour. But where's the rest of that sheet of paper? I examined the ground carefully in hopes of finding it, said the inspector. It was torn out of the dead man's hand. Why would someone so anxious to get possession of it? Because it incriminated him. And what would he do with it? Thrust it in his pocket, most likely, never noticing that a corner of it had been left in the grip of the corpse. If we can get the rest of that sheet, it is obvious that we should have gone a long way towards solving this mystery. Yes, but how can we get the criminal's pockets before we catch the criminal? Well. It was worth thinking over. Then there is another obvious point. The note was sent to William. The man who wrote it could not have taken it. Otherwise, of course, he might have delivered his own message by word of mouth. Who brought the note, then? Or did it come through the post? I have made inquiries, said the inspector. William received the letter by the afternoon post yesterday. The envelope was destroyed by him. Excellent! Good, cries Holmes, clapping the inspector on the back. You've seen the postman. It is a pleasure to work with you. Well, here's the lodge, and if you will come up, Colonel, I will show you the scene of the crime. We passed the pretty cottage where the murdered man had lived, and walked up an oak-lined avenue to the fine old Queen Anne house, which bared the date of Malpaquet upon the lintel of the door. Holmes and the inspector led us around it until we came to the side gate, which is separated by a stretch of garden from the hedge which lined the road. A constable was standing at the kitchen door. "But open the door, officer," said Holmes. Now you don't seem to be very quick after all. "Ah, you must give us a little time," said Holmes good-humoredly. "You'll want it," said young Alec Cunningham. I don't see that we have any clue at all." "There is only one," answered the inspector. "We thought that if we could only find—" "Good heavens, Mr. Holmes! What is the matter?" My poor friend's face had suddenly assumed the most dreadful expression. His eyes rolled upwards, his features writhed in agony, and with a suppressed groan he dropped on his face upon the ground. Horrified at the suddenness and severity of the attack, we carried him into the kitchen, where he laid back in a large chair and breathed heavily for some minutes. Finally, with a shamefaced apology for his weakness, he rose once more. "Watson would tell you that I have only just recovered from a severe illness," he explained. "I am liable to these sudden nervous attacks." "Hi, Icy. Hi. Well, how are you doing? How you doing, buddy? How you doing, Icy?" Yes, you can, in fact, clip now. You guys can clip scenes from my streams if you want to. But, that is a thing that can be done. There's a lot of things that can be done now. You could do, like, live reactions, too. It's interesting. It's weird. So, let me continue. We're still reading some Sherlock Holmes today, I see. We're reading the Reigate Squire Sherlock Holmes story. So, I hope you enjoy. "Shall I send you home in my trap?" asked old Cunningham. "Well, since I am here, there is one point on which I should like to feel sure. We can very easily verify it." "What is it?" "Well, it seems to me that it is just possible that the arrival of this poor fellow William was not before but after the entrance of the burglar into the house. You appear to take it for granted that although the door was forced, the robber never got in." "I fancy that is quite obvious," said Mr. Cunningham gravely. "Why, my son Alec had not yet gone to bed, and he would certainly have heard anyone moving about." "Where was he sitting?" "I was smoking in my dressing room." "Which window is that?" "The last one I left, next to my father's." "Both of your lamps were lit, of course." "Undoubtedly." "There are some very singular points here," said Holmes, smiling. "It is not extraordinary that a burglar, and a burglar who had some previous experience, should deliberately break into a house at a time when he could see from the lights that two of the family members were still afoot. He must have been a cool hand." "Well, of course, if the case were not an odd one, we should not have been driven to ask you for an explanation," said Mr. Alec. "But as to your idea that the man had robbed the house before William tackled him, I think it is a most absurd notion. Should we have found the place disarranged and missed the things which he had taken?" "It depends on what the things were," said Holmes. "You must remember that we are dealing with a burglar who is a very peculiar fellow, and who appears to work on lines of his own. Look, for example, at the queer lot of things which he took from Acton's. What was it? A ball of string, a letter weight, and I don't know what other odds and ends." "Well, we're quite in your hands, Mr. Holmes," said old Cunningham. "Anything which you or the inspector may suggest will most certainly be done." "In the first place," said Holmes, I should like to offer you a reward. Coming from yourself, for the officials may take a little time before they would agree upon the sum, and these things cannot be done too promptly. I've jotted down the form here, if you do not mind signing it. £50 was quite enough, I thought. I would willingly give 500, said the JP, taking the slip of paper and the pencil which Holmes had handed to him. This is not quite correct, however, he added, glancing over the document. I wrote it rather hurriedly. You see, you begin, whereas, at about 1:45 on Tuesday morning an attempt was made, and so on. It was at 11:45, as a matter of fact. I was pained at the mistake, for I knew how keenly Holmes would feel any slip of the kind. It was his specialty to be accurate as to fact, but his recent illness had shaken him, and this one little incident was enough to show me that he was still far from being himself. He was obviously embarrassed for an instant, while the inspector raised an eyebrow, and Alec Cunningham burst into a laugh. The old gentleman corrected the mistake, however, and handed the paper back to Holmes. Get it printed as soon as possible, he said. I think your idea is an excellent one. Holmes put the slip of paper carefully away into his pocketbook. And now, he said, it would really be a good thing that we should all go over to the house together and make certain that this rather erratic burglar did not, after all, carry anything away with him. Before entering, Holmes made an examination of the door, which had been forced. It was evident that a chisel or strong knife had been thrust in, and the lock forced back with it. We could see the marks in the wood where it had been pushed in. You don't use bars, then? He asked. We never found it necessary. You don't keep a dog? Yes, but he's chained on the other side of the house. When do the servants go to bed? About 10. I understand that William was usually in bed also at that hour. Yes. It is singular that on this particular night he should have been up. Now, I should be very glad if you would have the kindness to show us over the house, Mr. Cunningham. A stone-flagged passage, with the kitchens branching away from it, led by a wooden staircase directly to the first floor of the house. It came out upon a landing opposite to a second, more ornamental stair, which led up from the hall. Out from this landing opened the drawing room and several bedrooms, including those of Mr. Cunningham and his son. Holmes walked slowly, taking keen note of the architecture of the house. I could tell from his expression that he was on a hot scent, and yet I could not sing around the other chamber. Please, father, and see where he has gone to. They rushed out of the room, leaving the inspector, the colonel, and me staring at each other. Upon my word, I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Alec, said the official. It may be the effect of this illness, but it seems to me that... His words were cut short by a sudden scream of "Help!" shouting came from the room which we had first visited. I dashed in, and on into the dressing room beyond. The two Cunninghams were... Arrest these men, Inspector, he gasped. On what charge? That of murdering their coachman, William Kerwin. The inspector stared about him in bewilderment. Oh, come now, Mr. Holmes, he said at last. I'm sure you don't really mean to. Tut, tut, look at their faces, cried Holmes curtly. Never, certainly, have I seen a plainer confession of guilt upon the human countenance. The older man seemed numb and dazed, with a heavy, sullen expression upon his strongly marked face, but stepping to the door, he blew his whistle. Two of his constables came at the call. I have no alternative, Mr. Cunningham, he said. I trust that this may all be proved to be an absurd mistake, but you can see that... Ah, would you? Drop it. He struck out with his hand, and the revolver, which the young man was in the act of cocking, clattered down upon the floor. Keep that, said Holmes, quickly putting his foot upon it. You will find it useful at the trial. But this is what we really wanted. He held up a little crumpled piece of paper. The remainder of the sheet, cried the inspector. Precisely. And where was it? Where I was sure it must be. I'll make the whole matter clear to you presently, I think. I think, Colonel, that you and Watson might return now, and I will be with you again in an hour at the furthest. The inspector and I must have a word with the prisoners, but you will certainly see me back at luncheon time. Sherlock Holmes was as good as his word. For about 1 o'clock he rejoined us in the Colonel's smoking room. He was accompanied by a little elderly gentleman who who was introduced to me as the Mr. Acton, whose house had been the scene of the original burglary. Oh. I have something in my eye. Hold on. Maybe an eyelash. There we go. Oh, that was bugging me. That was bugging me. I wish Mr. Acton to be present while I demonstrated this small matter to you, said Holmes, for it is natural that he should take a keen interest in the details. I am afraid, my dear Colonel, that you must regret the hour that you took in such a stormy petrel as I am. On the contrary, answered the Colonel warmly, I consider it the greatest privilege to have been permitted to study your method of working. I confess that they quite surpass my expectations, and that I am utterly unable to account for your result. I have not yet seen the vestige of a clue. I am afraid that my explanation may disillusion you, but it has always been a habit to hide none of my methods, either from my friend Watson or from anyone who might take an intelligent interest in them. But first, as I am rather shaken by the knocking about which I had in the dressing room, I think that I shall help myself to a dash of your brandy, Colonel. My strength has been rather tried of late. I trust that you had no more of those nervous attacks. Sherlock Holmes laughed heartily. We will come to that in its turn, he said. I will lay an account of the case before you in its due order, showing you the various points which guided me in my decision. Pray interrupt me if there is any interference which is not perfectly clear to you. It is of the highest importance in the art of detection to be able to recognize out of a number of facts which are incidental and which is vital. Otherwise, your energy and attention must be dissipated instead of being concentrated. Now, in this case, there was not the slightest doubt in my mind from the first that the key of the whole matter must be looked for in the scrap of paper in the dead man's hand. Before going into this, I would draw your attention to the fact that if Alec Cunningham's narrative was correct, and if the assailant, after shooting William Kerwin, had instantly fled, then it obviously could not be he who tore the paper from the dead man's hand. But if it were not he, then it must have been Alec Cunningham himself, for by the time the old man had descended, several servants were upon the scene. The point is a simple one, but the inspector had overlooked it because he had started with the supposition that these county magnates had had nothing to do with the matter. Now, I make a point of never having any prejudices, and of following docilely wherever fact may lead me. And so, in the very first stage of the investigation, I found myself looking a little askance at the part which had been played by Mr. Alec Cunningham. And now I made a very careful examination of the corner of paper which the inspector had submitted to us. It was at once clear to me that it formed part of a very remarkable document. Here it is. Do you not now observe something very suggestive about it? It has a very irregular look, said the Colonel. My dear sir, cried Holmes, there cannot be the least doubt in the world that it has been written by two persons doing alternate words. When I draw your attention to strong T's of at and to, and ask you to compare them with the weak ones of quarter and 12, you will instantly recognize the fact. A very brief analysis of those 4 words would enable you to say with the utmost confidence that the learn and the maybe are written in the stronger hand and the what in the weaker. By Jove, it's as clear as day, cried the Colonel. Why on earth should 2 men write a letter in such a fashion? Obviously the business was a bad one, and one of the men who distrusted the other was determined that, whatever was done, each should have an equal hand in it. Now, of the 2 men, it is clear that the one who wrote the at and to was the ringleader. How do you get that? We might deduce it from the mere character of the one hand as compared with the other. We have more assured reasons than that for supposing it. I went up to the house of the inspector, and saw all that was to be seen. The wound upon the dead man was, as I was able to determine with absolute confidence, caused by a shot from a revolver fired at a distance of somewhat over 4 yards. There was no powder blackening on the clothes. Evidently, therefore, Alec Cunningham had lied when he said that the 2 men were struggling when the shot was fired. Again, Both father and son agreed as to the place where the man escaped into the road. At that point, however, as it happens, there is a broadish ditch, moist at the bottom. As there was no indications of boot marks about this ditch, I was absolutely sure that not only that the Cunninghams had lied again, but that there had never been any unknown man upon the scene at all. And now I had to consider the motive of this singular crime. To get at this, I endeavored first of all to solve the reason of the original burglary at Mr. Acton's. I understood from something which the Colonel had told us that a lawsuit had been going on between you, Mr. Acton, and the Cunninghams. Of course, it instantly occurred to me that they had broken into your library with the intention of getting at some documents which might be of importance into the case. Precisely so, said Mr. Acton. There can be no possible doubt as to their intentions. I have the clearest claim upon half their present estate, and if they could have found a single paper, which, fortunately, was in the strong box of my solicitors, they would have undoubtedly have crippled our case. There you are, said Holmes, smiling. It was a dangerous, reckless attempt in which I seemed to trace the influence of young Alec. Having found nothing, they tried to divert suspicion by making it appear to be an ordinary burglary, to which end they carried off whatever they could lay their hands upon. That is all clear enough. There was much that was still obscure. What I wanted above all was to get to the missing part of that note. I was certain that Alec had torn it out of the dead man's hand, and almost certain that he must have thrust it into the pocket of his dressing gown. Where else could he have put it? The only question was whether it was still there. It was worth an effort to find out, and for that object we all went up to the house. The Cunninghams joined us, as you doubtless remember, outside the kitchen door. It was, of course, of the very first importance that they should not be reminded of the existence of this paper. Otherwise, they would naturally destroy it without delay. The inspector was about to tell them the importance of which we attached to it, when by the luckiest chance in the world, I tumbled down in a sort of fit, and so changed the conversation. Good heavens, cried the Colonel, laughing. Do you mean to say all of our sympathy was wasted and your fit was an impostor? Speaking professionally, it was admirably done, I cried, looking in amazement at this man who was forever confounding me in some new phase of his astuteness. This is an art which is often useful, he said. When I recovered, I managed by a device, which had, perhaps, some little merit of ingenuity, to get old Cunningham to write the word 12, so that I might compare it with the 12 upon the paper. Oh, what an ass I've been, I exclaimed. I can see that you were commiserating with me over my weakness, said Holmes, laughing. I was sorry to cause you the sympathetic pain which I had known you felt. We then went upstairs together, and having entered the room and seen the dressing gown hanging up behind the door, I contrived by upsetting a table to engage their attention for the moment and slipped back to examine the pockets. I had hardly got the paper, however, which was what I had expected, in one of them, when the two Cunninghams were on me, and I would, I verily believe, have murdered me, then and there, but for your prompt and friendly aid. As it is, I feel that young man's grip on my throat now, and the father had twisted my wrist around in the effort to get the paper out of my hand. They saw I must know all about it, you see, and the sudden change from absolute sincerity to complete despair made them perfectly desperate. I had a little talk with old Cunningham afterward as to the motive of the crime. He was tractable enough, though his son was a perfect demon, ready to blow out his own or anybody else's brains if he could have gotten to his revolver. When Cunningham saw that the case against him was so strong, he lost all heart and made a clean breast of everything. It seems that William had secretly followed his two masters on the night when they made their raid upon Mr. Acton's, and, having thus gotten them into his power, proceeded to, under threats of exposure, to levy blackmail upon them. Mr. Alec, however, was a dangerous man to play games of that sort with. It was a stroke of positive genius on his part to seize the burglary scare, which was convulsing the countryside, an opportunity of plausibly getting rid of the man whom he feared. William was decoyed upon and shot, and they only got the whole of the note and paid little more attention to details in the accessories. It is very possible that suspicion may have never been aroused. And the note? I asked. Sherlock Holmes placed a subjoined paper before us. It seems like a script, so I'm gonna try to read it. Hold on. If you only come around at 11:45 to the East Gate, you will learn that to the East Gate, you will learn what will very much surprise you, and maybe be of the greatest service to you and also to... I can't really read that level. Something to... It's in a very, very, very blobby script, so give me 1 second. Like, it's a very blobby script. Like, it's... blobby. Like, I can read script, but this is very blobby. Yes. I can't read it. And also to someone Morrison. Best say nothing to anyone upon this matter. Huh. It is very much the sort of thing I expect, he said. Of course, we do not know what the relationship... Oh, Annie Morrison, there we go. So the note says, if you will only come around at 11:45 to the East Gate, you will learn what will very much surprise you, and maybe be of the greatest service to you and also to Annie Morrison. Best say nothing to anyone upon this matter. So it's very much the sort of thing I expect, he said. Of course, we do not know what the relations may have been between Alec Cunningham, William Kerwin, and Annie Morrison. The result shows that the trap was skillfully baited, and I am sure you cannot fail to be delighted with the traces of heredity shown in the P's and in the tails of the G's. The absence of the I dots in the old man's writing is also most characteristic. Watson, I think our quiet rest in the country has been a distinct success, and I shall certainly return, much invigorated, to Baker Street tomorrow. Nice. Yeah, but they do have like an illustration of the note. It's very blobby, so it's very difficult to read. That was pretty cool. That was pretty neat. Although very bold of those Cunningham men trying to kill Sherlock Holmes while there are police in your house. So, you know, not a very big brain move. Very tiny, smooth brain move. Even my one brain cell knew better than that. And it'd be tired. And it'd be a tired brain cell. So, okay. Now have another sip of coffee. Alright, now we're gonna get started with the next story, A Scandal in Bohemia. To Sherlock Holmes, she is always the woman. I've seldom heard him mention her under any other name. In his eyes, she eclipses and predominates the whole of her sex. It was not that he felt any emotion akin to love for Irene Adler. All emotions, and that one particularly, were abhorrent to his cold, precise, but admirably balanced mind. He was, I take it, the most perfect reasoning and observing machine that the world has seen, but, as a lover, he would have placed himself in a false position. He never spoke of softer passions, save with a gibe and a sneer. They were admirable things for the observer, excellent for drawing a veil from men's motives and actions. But for the trained reasoner to admit such intrusions into his own delicate and finely adjusted temperament was to introduce a distracting factor which might throw a doubt upon all his mental results. Grit in a sensitive instrument, or a crack in one of his own high-powered lenses, would not be more disturbing than a strong emotion in a nature such as his. And yet there was but one woman to him, and that woman was the late Irene Adler, of dubious and questionable memory. I have seen little of Holmes since the singular chain of events which I have already narrated in a bold fashion under my heading, The Sign of the Four. My marriage had, as he foretold, drifted us away from each other. My own complete happiness, and the home-centered interest which rise up around the man who first finds himself master of his own establishment, were sufficient to absorb all my attention. While Holmes, who loathed every form of the society with his whole bohemian soul, remained in our lodgings in Baker Street, buried among his old books, and alternating from week to week between cocaine and ambition, the drowsiness of the drug, and the fierce energy of his own keen nature. He was still, as ever, deeply attracted by the study of crime, and occupied his immense faculties and extraordinary powers of observation in which following out on those clues and clearing up those mysteries which had been abandoned as hopeless by the official police. From time to time I heard some vague account of his doings, of his summons to Odessa in the case of the Trepov murder, of his clearing up of the singular tragedy of the Atkinson brothers at Trincomalee, and finally of the mission which he had accomplished so delicately and successfully from the reigning family of Holland. Beyond these signs of his activity, however, which I merely shared with all the readers of the daily press, I knew little of my former friend and companion. One night, it was on the 20th of March, 1888, I was returning from a journey to a patient, for I had now returned to civil practice, when my way led me through Baker Street. I passed a well-remembered door, which must always be associated in my mind with my wooing and with the dark incidents of the study in scarlet. I was seized with a keen desire to see Holmes again, and to know how he was employing his extraordinary powers. His rooms were brilliantly lit, and, even as I looked up, I saw his tall, spare figure pass twice in a dark silhouette against the blind. He was pacing the room swiftly, eagerly, with his head sunk upon his chest, and his hand clasped behind him. To me, who knew his every mood and habit, his attitude and manner told their own story. He was at work again. He had risen out of his drug-created dreams and was hot upon the scent of some new problem. I rang the bell and was shown up to the chamber which had formerly been in part my own. His manner was not effusive. It seldom was, but he was glad, I think, to see me. With hardly a spoken word, but with a kindly eye, he waved me to an armchair, threw across his case of cigars, and indicated a spirit case and a gasogene in the corner. Then he stood before the fire and looked me over in his singular introspective fashion. "Wedlock suits you," he remarked. "I think, Watson, that you have put on 7.5 pounds since I saw you." 7, I answered. "Indeed, I should have thought a little more. Just a trifle more, I fancy, Watson. And in practice again, I observed. You did not tell me that you intended to go into harness." "Then, how do you know?" "I see it. I deduce it. How do I know that you have been getting yourself very wet lately, and that you have a most clumsy and careless servant girl?" "My dear Holmes," I said, "this is too much. You would certainly have been burned had you lived a few centuries ago. It is true that I had a country walk on Thursday and came home in a dreadful mess. But as I have changed my clothes, I can't imagine how you deduce it. As to Mary Jane, she's incorrigible, and my wife has given her notice. But there again I fail to see how you work it out." He chuckled to himself and rubbed his long nervous hands together. "It is simplicity itself," he said. "My eyes tell me that on the inside of your left shoe, just where the firelight strikes, the leather is scored by 6 almost parallel cuts. Obviously they have been caused by someone who has very carelessly scraped around the edges of the sole in order to remove crusted mud from it. Hence, you see, my double deduction that you have been out in vile weather, and that you had a particularly malignant boot-slitting specimen of the London slavey. As for your practice, if a gentleman walks into my room smelling of iodoform, with a black mark of nitrate of silver upon his right forefinger, and a bulge on the side of his top hat to show he has secreted his stethoscope, I must be a dull indeed if I do not pronounce him to be an active member of the medical profession." I cannot help laughing at the ease of which he explained his process of deduction. "When I hear you give your reasons," I remarked, The thing always appears to me to be so ridiculously simple that I could easily do it myself. Though at each successive instance of your reasoning, I am baffled until you explain your process. And yet I believe that my eyes are as good as yours. Quite so, he answered, lighting a cigarette and throwing himself into an armchair. You see, but you do not observe. The distinction is clear. For example, you have frequently seen the steps which lead up from the hall to this room. Frequently. How often? Well, some hundreds of times. Then how many are there? How many? I don't know. Quite so. You have not observed, and you have seen. That is just my point. Now, I know that there are 17 steps, because I have both seen and observed. By the way, since you are interested in these little problems, and since you are good enough to chronicle one or two of my trifling experiences, you may be interested in this. He threw over a sheet of thick, pink-tinted notepaper which had been lying open on the table. It came by the last post, he said. Read it out loud. The note was undated, and without either signature or address. There will be a call upon you tonight at 7:45, it said. A gentleman who desires to consult you upon a matter of the very deepest moment. You received your recent services to one of the royal houses of Europe have shown that you are one who may safely be trusted with matters which are of importance which can hardly be exaggerated. This account of you we have from all quarters received. Be in your chamber then at that hour, and do not take it amiss if your visitor wears a mask. This is indeed a mystery, I remarked. What do you imagine that it means? I have no data yet. It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. Insensibly, one begins to twist facts into suit theories, instead of theories into suit facts. But the note itself, what do you deduce from it? I carefully examined the writing, and the paper upon which it was written. The man who wrote it was presumably well-to-do, I remarked, endeavoring to intimidate my companion's processes. Such paper could not be bought under a half a crown packet. It is peculiarly strong and stiff. Peculiar. Peculiar. That is the very word, said Holmes. It's not an English paper at all. Hold it up to the light. I did so and saw a large E with a small G, a P, and a large G, with a small T woven into the texture of the paper. What do you make of that? Asked Holmes. The name of the maker, no doubt, or his monogram, rather. Not at all. The G with the small T stands for Gesellschaft, which is a German for company. Its customary contraction, like our cove. P, of course, stands for papier. Now for the EG, let us glance at our Continental Gazetteer. He took down a heavy brown volume from his shelves. Eglonsitz. Here we are, Egria. It is a German-speaking country, in Bohemia, not far from Carlsbad. Remarkable as being the scene of the death of Wallenstein, and for its numerous glass factories and paper mills. My boy, what do you make of that? His eyes sparkled as he sent up a great blue triumphant cloud from his cigarette. The paper was made in Bohemia, I said. Precisely. And the man who wrote the note is a German. Do you note the peculiar construction of the sentence? This account of you we have from all quarters received. A Frenchman or a Russian could not have written that. It is a German who is so uncourteous to his verbs. It only remains, therefore, to discover what is wanted by this German who writes upon Bohemian paper, and prefers wearing a mask to showing his face. And here he comes, if I'm not mistaken, to resolve all our doubts. As he spoke, there was a sharp sound of horses' hooves and grating wheels against the curb, followed by a sharp pull at the bell. Holmes whistled. A pair by the sound, he said. Yes, he continued, glancing out of the window. A nice little brougham and a pair of beauties, 150 guineas apiece. There's money in this case, Watson. If there is nothing else. I think that I had better go, Holmes. Not a bit, Doctor. Stay where you are. I am lost without my Boswell. And this promises to be interesting. It would be a pity to miss it. But your client. Never mind him. It may want your help, and so may he. Here he comes. Sit down in that armchair, Doctor, and give us your best attention. A slow and heavy step, which had been heard upon the stairs in the passage, paused immediately outside the door. Then there was a loud and authoritative tap. "Come in," said Holmes. A man entered who could hardly have been less than 6 feet 6 inches in height, with the chest and limbs of a Hercules. His dress was rich with a richness which would, in England, be looked upon as akin to bad taste. Heavy bands of astrakhan were slashed across the sleeves and front of his double-breasted coat, while the deep blue cloak, which was thrown over his shoulders, was lined with flame-colored silk, and secured by the neck with a brooch which consisted of a single flaming barrel. Boots which extended halfway up his calves, and which were trimmed at the top with rich brown fur, completed the impression of a barbaric opulence which was suggested by his whole appearance. He carried a broad-brimmed hat in his hand, while he wore across the upper part of his face, extended down past the cheekbones, a black visored mask, which he had apparently adjusted at that very moment, for his hand was still raised to it as he entered. From the lower part of the face, he appeared to be a man of strong character, with a thick, hanging lip and a strong, straight chin, suggestive of resolution pushed to the length of obstinacy. "You had my note?" he asked, with a deep, harsh voice and a strongly marked German accent. "I told you that I would call." He looked from one to the other of us, as if uncertain which to address. "Pray, take a seat," said Holmes. "This is my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson, who is occasionally good enough to help me in my cases. Whom have I the honor to address?" "You may address me as the Count von Krem, a Bohemian noble. I understand that this gentleman, your friend, is a man of honor and discretion, who I may trust with a matter of the most extreme importance. If not, I should much prefer to communicate with you alone." I rose to go, but Holmes caught me by the wrist and pushed me back to my chair. "It is both or none," he said. "You may say before this gentleman anything which you may say to me." The Count shrugged his broad shoulders. "Then I must begin," he said, "by binding you both to absolute secrecy for 2 years. At the end of time, the matter will be of no importance. At present, it is not too much to say that it is of such weight that it may have an influence upon European history." "I promise," said Holmes. "And I." "You will excuse this mask," continued our strange visitor. "The august person who employs me wishes his agent to be unknown to you, and I may confess at once that the title by which I have just called myself is not exactly my own." "I was aware of it," said Holmes dryly. "The circumstances are of great delicacy, and every precaution has to be taken to quench what might grow to be an immense scandal and seriously compromise one of the reigning families of Europe. To speak plainly, the matter implicates the great house of Ormstein, hereditary kings of Bohemia." "I was also aware of that," murmured Holmes, settling himself down into his armchair and closing his eyes. Our visitor glanced with some apparent surprise at the languid, slouching figure of the man who had been no doubt depicted to him as the most incisive reasoner and the most energetic agent in Europe. Holmes slowly reopened his eyes and looked impatiently at his gigantic client. "If your Majesty would consent to state your case," he remarked, I should be better able to advise you." The man sprang from his chair and paced up and down the room in uncontrollable agitation. Then, with a gesture of desperation, he tore the mask from his face and hurled it upon the ground. "You are right," he cried. "I am the king. Why should I attempt to conceal it?" "Why, indeed," murmured Holmes. "Your Majesty had not spoken before I was aware that I was addressing Wilhelm Gottfried Gottfried Sigismund von Ormstrand, Grand Duke of Cassel-Felstein, and hereditary King of Bohemia. But you can understand, said our strange visitor, sitting down once more and passing his hand over his high, white forehead. You can understand that I am not accustomed to doing such business in my own person. Yet the matter was so delicate that I could not confide it to an agent without putting myself in his power. I have come incognito from Prague for the purpose of consulting you. Then pray, consult, said Holmes, shutting his eyes once more. The facts are briefly these. Some 5 years ago, during a lengthy visit to Warsaw, I made the acquaintance of the well-known adventuress Irene Adler. The name is no doubt familiar to you. Kindly look her up in my index, Doctor, murmured Holmes without opening his eyes. For many years he had adopted a system of docketing all paragraphs concerning men and things, so that it was difficult to name a subject or person on which he could not at once furnish information. In this case, I found her biography sandwiched between that of a Hebrew rabbi and that of a staff commander who had written a monograph compromising letters and is now desirous of getting those letters back. Precisely so. But how? Was there a secret marriage? None. No legal papers or certifications. None. Then I fail to follow your majesty. If this young person should produce her letters for blackmailing or other purposes, how is she to prove their authenticity? There is the writing. Pooh-pooh. Forgery. My private notepaper. Stolen. My own seal. Imitated. My photograph. Bought. We were both in the photograph. Oh dear, that is very bad. Your Majesty has indeed committed an indiscretion. I was mad. Insane. You have compromised yourself seriously. I was only crown prince then. I was young. I am but 30 now. It must be recovered. We have tried and failed. Your Majesty must pay. It must be bought. She will not sell. Stolen, then. 5 attempts have been made. Twice burglars in my pay ransacked her house. Once we diverted her luggage when she traveled. Twice she has been waylaid. There has been no result. No sign of it? Absolutely none. Holmes laughed. It is quite a pretty little problem, he said. But a very serious one to me, returned the king reproachfully. Very indeed. And what does she propose to do with the photograph? To ruin me. But how? I am to be married, so I heard, to Clotilde Losman von Saxe-Meiningen, second daughter of the King of Scandinavia. You may know the strict principles of her family. She is herself the very soul of delicacy. A shadow of a doubt as to my conduct will bring the matter to an end. And Irene Adler threatens to send them the photograph, and she will do it. She knows that she will. I know that she will do it. You do not know her, but she has a soul of steel. She has the face of the most beautiful of women, and the mind of the most resolute of men. Rather than I should marry another woman, there are no lengths to which she would not go. None. Are you sure that she has not yet sent it? I am sure. And why? Because she has said that she would send it on the day when the betrothal was publicly proclaimed. That would be next Monday. Oh, then we have 3 days yet, said Holmes with a yawn. That is very fortunate, as I have 1 or 2 matters of importance to look into just at present. Your Majesty will, of course, stay in London for the present. Certainly. You will find me at the Langham under the name of Count von Kram, and I shall drop you a line to let you know how we progress. Pray do so. I shall be all anxiety. Then, as to the money, you have carte blanche? Absolutely. I'll tell you that I will give one of the provinces of my kingdom to have that photograph. And for present expenses? The king took a very heavy chamois leather bag from under his cloak and laid it on the table. There are 300 pounds in gold and 700 in notes, he said. Holmes scribbled a receipt upon the sheet of his notebook and handed it to him. "And the mademoiselle's address?" he asked. Is Briony Lodge, Serpentine Avenue, St. John's Wood." Holmes took a note of it. "One other question," he said. "Was the photograph a cabinet?" "It was." "Then good night, Your Majesty, and I trust we shall soon have some good news for you. And good night, Watson," he added, as the wheels of the Royal Brougham rolled down the street. "If you will be good enough to call tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock, I should like to chat this little matter over with you." At 3 o'clock precisely, I was at Baker Street, but Holmes had not yet returned. The landlady informed me that he had left the house shortly after 8 o'clock in the morning. I sat down beside the fire, however, with the intention of awaiting him, however long he may be. I was already deeply interested in his inquiry, for, though it was surrounded by none of the grim and strange features which were associated with the two crimes which I had already recorded, still, the nature of the case and the exalted station of his client gave it a character of his own. Indeed, apart from the nature of the investigation, which my friend had a hand on, there was something in his masterly grasp of a situation, and his keen, incisive reasoning, which made it a pleasure to me to study his system of work, and to follow the quick, subtle methods by which he disentangled the most inextractable mysteries. So accustomed was I to his invariable success that the very possibility of his failing had ceased to enter into my mind. It was close upon 4 before the door opened, and a drunken-looking groom, ill-kempt and side-whiskered, with an inflamed face and disreputable clothes, walked into the room. Accustomed as I was to my friend's amazing powers in the use of disguises, I had to look 3 times before I was certain that it was indeed he. With a nod he vanished into the bedroom, whence he emerged in 5 minutes, tweed-suited and respectable, as of old. Putting his hands into his pocket, he stretched out his legs in front of the fire and laughed heartily for some minutes. "Well, really," he cried, and then he choked and laughed again until he was obligated to lie back, limp and helpless, in the chair. "What is it?" "It's quite too funny. I am sure you could never guess how I employed my morning, or what I ended by doing." "I can imagine. I suppose that you have been watching the habits, and perhaps the house, of Miss Irene Adler." "Quite so, but the sequel was rather unusual. I will tell you. However, I left the house a little after 8 o'clock this morning, in the character of a groom out of work. There is a wonderful sympathy and Freemasonry among horsey men. Be one of them, and you will know all that there is to know. And as soon as I found Briony Lodge, it is a bijou villa, with a garden at the back, but built out in front right up to the road, 2 stories. Chubb locked to the door. Large sitting room on the right side, well furnished with long windows and almost to the floor, and those preposterous English window fasteners which a child could open. Behind there was nothing remarkable, save that the passage window could be reached from the top of the coach house. I walked around it and examined it closely from every point of view, without noting anything else of interest. Then I lounged down the street and found, as I expected, that there was a mews in the lane which runs down by one wall of the garden. I lent the ostlers a hand in rubbing down their horses, and I received in exchange a 2d, a glass of half and half, 2 fills of shag tobacco, and as much information I could desire about Miss Adler, to say nothing of half a dozen other people in the neighborhood in whom I was not in the least interested, but whose biographies I was compelled to listen to. "And what of Irene Adler?" I asked. "Oh, she has turned all the men's heads down in the part. She is the daintiest thing under a bonnet in this planet. So say the Serpentine Muse to a man. She lives quietly, sings at concerts, drives out at 5 every day, and returns at 7 sharp for dinner. Seldom goes out on other times, except when she sings. Has only 1 male visitor, but a good deal of him. He is dark, handsome, and dashing. Never calls less than once a day, and often twice. He is a Mr. Godfrey Norton of the Inner Temple. Sees the advantages of a cabman as a confidant. They had driven him home a dozen times from Serpentine Mews, and knew all about him. When I had listened to all that they had to tell, I began to walk up and down near Briony Lodge once more, and to think over my plan of campaign. This Godfrey Norton was evidently an important factor in this matter. He was a lawyer. That sounded ominous. What was the relationship between them, and what of the object of his repeated visit? Was she his client, his friend, or his mistress? If the former, she had probably transferred the photograph to his keeping. If the latter, it was less likely. On the issue of this question depended on whether I should continue my work at Briony Lodge, or turn my attention to the gentleman's chamber in the temple. It was a delicate point, and it widened the field of my inquiry. I fear that I bore you with these details, but I have to let you see my little difficulties if you are to understand the situation. I am following you closely, I answered. I was still balancing the matter in my mind when a hansom cab drove up to Briony Lodge, and a gentleman sprang out. He was remarkably handsome, dark, aquiline, and moustache. Evidently the man of whom I had heard. He appeared to be in a great hurry, shouting to the cabman to wait, and brushed past the maid who opened the door with an air of a man who was thoroughly at home. He was in the house about half an hour, and I could catch glimpses of him in the window of the sitting room, pacing up and down, talking excitedly and waving his arms. Of her I could see nothing. Presently he emerged, looking even more flurried than before. As he stepped up to the cab, he pulled a gold watch from his pocket and looked at it earnestly. "Drive like the devil," he shouted. "First to Gross and Thankies in Regent Street, and then to the Church of St. Monica's in the Edgware Road. Half a guinea if you do it in 20 minutes." Away they went, and I was just wondering whether I should not do well to follow them, when up on the lane came a neat little landau. The coachman, with his coat only half buttoned and his tie under his ear, while all the tags of his harness were sticking out of the buckles. It hadn't pulled up before she shot out of the hall door and into it. I only caught a glimpse of her at the moment, but she was a lovely woman, with a face that a man might die for. "The Church of St. Monica, John," she cried, "and half a sovereign if you reach it in 20 minutes. This is quite too good to lose, Watson. I was just balancing whether I should run for it, or whether I should perch behind her landau, when a cab came through the street. The driver looked twice at such a shabby fare, but I jumped in before he could object. "The Church of St. Monica," I said, "and half a sovereign if we reach it in 20 minutes. It was 25 minutes to 12, and of course it was clear enough what was in the wind. The cabby drove fast. I don't think I ever drove faster, but the others were there before us. The cab and the landau, with their steaming horses, were in front of the door when I arrived. I paid the man and hurried into the church. There was not a soul there, save the two I had followed, and a surprised clergyman, who seemed to be expostulating with them. They were all three standing in a knot in front of the altar. I lounged up the side aisle like any other idler who had dropped into church. Suddenly, to my surprise, the three at the altar faced around to me, and Godfrey Norton came running as hard as he could towards me. "Thank God," he cried. "You'll do. Come, come." "What then?" I asked. "Come, man, come, only 3 minutes, or it won't be legal." I was half dragged up to the altar, and before I knew where I was, I found myself mumbling response which were whispered in my ear, vouching for things of which I knew nothing, and generally assisting in the secure tying up of Irene Adler, spinster, to Godfrey Norton, bachelor. It was all done in an instant, and there was the gentleman thanking me on one side, and the lady on the other, while the clergyman beamed on in front of me. It was the most preposterous position in which I ever found myself in my life, and it was the thought of it that started me laughing just now. It seems that there had been some informality about their license, and the clergyman absolutely refused to marry them without a witness of some sort, and that my lucky appearance saved the bridegroom from having to sally out into the streets in search of a best man. The bride gave me a sovereign, and I meant to wear it on my watch chain in memory of the occasion. "This is a very unexpected turn of affairs," I said. And what then? Well, I found my plans very seriously menaced. It looked as if the pair might take an immediate departure, and so necessitate very prompt and energetic measures on my part. At the church door, however, they separated, he driving back to the temple, and she to her own house. I shall drive out in the park at 5 as usual, she said as she left him. I heard no more. They drove away in different directions, and I went off to make my own arrangements. Which are? Some cold beef and a glass of beer, he answered, ringing the bell. I've been too busy to think of food, and I am likely to be busier this evening. By the way, Doctor, I shall want your cooperation. I shall be delighted. You do not mind breaking the law? Not in the least. Nor running a chance of arrest? Not in a good cause. Oh, the cause is excellent. Then I am your man. I was sure that I might rely on you. But what is it you wish? When Mrs. Turner has brought in the tray, I will make it clear to you. Now, he said as he turned hungrily on the simple fare that our landlady has provided. I must discuss it while I eat, for I have not much time. It's nearly 5 now. In 2 hours we must be on the scene of action. Miss Irene, or Madam, rather, returns from her drive at 7. We must be at Briony Lodge to meet her. And what then? You must leave that to me. I have already arranged what is to occur. There is only one point on which I must insist. You must not interfere, come what may. You understand? I am to be neutral. To do nothing whatsoever. There will probably be some small unpleasantness. Do not join in it. It will end in my being conveyed into the house. 4 or 5 minutes afterwards, the sitting room window will be open. You are to station yourself close to that open window. Yes. You are to watch me, for I will be visible to you. Yes. And when I raise my hand, so, you will throw into the room what I give you to throw, and will, at the same time, raise the cry of fire. You quite follow me? Entirely. It is nothing very formidable, he said, taking a long cigarette-shaped roll from his pocket. It is an ordinary plumber's smoke rocket, fitted with a cap at either end to make it self-lighting. Your task is confined to that. When you raise your cry of fire, it will be taken up by quite a number of people. You may then walk to the end of the street, and I will rejoin you in 10 minutes. I hope that I have made myself clear. I am to remain neutral, to get near the window, to watch you, and, at your signal, to throw this object, and then raise the cry of fire, and to await you at the corner of the street. Precisely. Then you may entirely rely on me. That is excellent. I think perhaps it is almost time that I prepare for the new role I have to play. He disappeared into his bedroom, and then returned a few minutes in the character of an amiable and simple-minded nonconformist clergyman. His broad black hat, his baggy trousers, his white tie, and his sympathetic smile, and a general look of peering and benevolent curiosity, were such as Mr. John Hare alone could have equaled. It was not merely that Holmes changed his costume. His expression, his manner, his very soul seemed to vary with each fresh part that he assumes. The stage lost a fine actor, even as science lost an acute reasoner, when he became a specialist in crime. It was 6:15 when we left Baker Street, and it still wanted 10 minutes to the hour when we found ourselves in Serpentine Avenue. It was already dusk, and the lamps were just being lighted as we paced up and down in front of the Briony Lodge, waiting for the coming of its occupant. The house was such as I had pictured it from Sherlock Holmes' succinct description, but the locality appeared to be less private than I expected. On the contrary, for a small street in a quiet neighborhood, it was remarkably animated. There was a group of shabbily dressed men smoking and laughing in the corner, a scissors grinder with his wheel, 2 guardsmen who were flirting with a nurse girl, and several well-dressed young men who were lounging up and down with cigars in their mouths. You see, remarked Holmes as we paced to and fro in front of the house, this marriage rather simplifies matters. The photograph becomes a double-edged weapon now. The chances are that she would be as averse to it being seen by Mr. Godfrey Norton as our client is to its coming to the eyes of his princess. Now the question is, where are we to find the photograph? Where indeed. It is most unlikely that she carries it about with her. It is cabinet size, too large for easy concealment about a woman's dress. She knows that the king is capable of having her waylaid and searched. Well, capable of having her waylaid and searched. 2 attempts of the sort had already been made. We may take it that she does not carry it about with her. Where then? Her banker or her lawyer? There is that double possibility, but I am inclined to think neither. Women are naturally secretive, and they like to do their own secreting. Why should she hand it over to anyone else? She could trust her own guardianship, but she cannot tell what indirect or political influence might be brought to bear upon a businessman. Besides, remember that she had resolved to use it within a few days. It must be where she came to lay her hands upon it. It must be in her own house. But it has twice been burgled. Pshaw. They did not know how to look. But how will you look? I will not look. What then? I will get her to show me. But she will refuse. She will not be able to. But I hear the rumbling of wheels. It is her carriage. Now carry out my orders to the letter. As he spoke, the gleam of the side lights of a carriage came round the curve of the avenue. It was a smart little landau which rattled up to the door of Briony Lodge. As it pulled up, one of the loafing men at the corner dashed forward to open the door in the hope of earning a copper, but was elbowed away by another loafer who had rushed up with the same intention. A fierce quarrel broke out, which was increased by the 2 guardsmen, who took sides with one of the loungers, and by the scissors grinder, who was equally hot upon the other side. A blow was struck, and in an instant the lady, who had stepped from her carriage, was the center of a little knot of flushed and struggling men who struck savagely at each other with their fists and sticks. Holmes dashed into the crowd to protect the lady, but just as he reached her and dropped to the ground, the blood running freely down his face. At his fall, the guardsmen took to their heels in one direction and the loungers in the other, while a number of better-dressed people who had watched the scuffle without taking part in it crowded in to help the lady and to attend to the injured man. Irene Adler, as I will still call her, had hurried up the steps, but she stood atop of her superb figure outlined against the lights of the hall, looking back into the street. "Is the poor gentleman much hurt?" she asked. "He is dead," cried several voices. "No, no, there is life in him," shouted another, "but he will be gone before you can get him to the hospital." "He's a brave fellow," said a woman. "He would have had the lady's purse and watch if it hadn't been. They would have had a lady's purse and watch if it hadn't been for him. They were a gang, and a rough one too. Ah, he's breathing now. He can't lie in the street. May we bring him in, ma'am?" "Surely. Bring him into the sitting room. There's a comfortable sofa. This way, please." Slowly and solemnly he was borne into Briony Lodge and laid up in the principal room, while I still observed the proceedings from my post by the window. The lamps had been lit, but the blinds had not been drawn, so I could see Holmes as he laid upon the couch. I do not know whether he was seized with compunction at that moment for the part he was playing, but I know that I never felt more heartily ashamed of myself in my life than when I saw the beautiful creature against whom I was conspirating, or the grace and kindliness with which she waited upon the injured man. It would be the blackest treachery to Holmes to draw back now from the part which he had entrusted to me. I hardened my heart and took the smoke rocket from under my ulster. After all, I thought, we are not injuring her. We are but preventing her from injuring another. Holmes had sat up on the couch, and I saw him motion like a man who was in want of air. A maid rushed across and threw open the window. At the same instant I saw him raise his hand, and at the signal I tossed my rocket into the room with a cry of "Fire!" The word was no sooner out of my mouth than the whole crowd of spectators, well-dressed and ill, gentlemen, ulsters, and service-maids, joining in a general shriek of "Fire!" Thick clouds of smoke curled into the room and out of the open window. I caught a glimpse of rushing figures, and a moment later the voice of Holmes from within, assuring them that it was a false alarm. Slipping through the shouting crowd, I made my way to the corner of the street, and in 10 minutes was rejoiced to find my friend's arm in mine, and to get away from the scene of uproar. He walked swiftly and in silence for some minutes, until we had turned down one of the quiet streets which led towards the Edgeware Road. You did it very nicely, Doctor, he remarked. Nothing could have been better. It is all right. You have the photograph. I know where it is. And how did you find it? She showed me, as I had told you she would. I am still in the dark. I do not wish to make a mystery, he said, laughing. The matter was perfectly simple. You, of course, saw that everyone in the street was an accomplice. They were all engaged for the evening. I guessed as much. Then, when the row broke out, I had a little moist red paint in the palm of my hand. I rushed forward, fell down, clapped my hand to my face, and became a piteous spectacle. It is an old trick. That I could also fathom. Then they carried me in. She was bound to have me in. What else could she do? And in her sitting room, which was the very room which I expected, it lay between that and her bedroom, and I was determined to see which. They laid me upon a couch. I motioned for air. They were compelled to open the window, and you had your chance. How did that help you? It was all important. When a woman thinks that her house is on fire, her instinct is at once to rush into the thing which she values most. It is a perfectly overpowering impulse, and I have more than once taken advantage of it. In such the case of Darlington's substitutional scandal, it was of use to me, and also in the Ardsworth Castle business. A married woman grabs at her baby. An unmarried one reaches for her jewel box. Now it is clear to me that Our Lady of today has nothing in the house more precious to her than what we are in quest of. She would rush to secure it. An alarm of fire was admirably done. Smoke and shouting was enough to shake the nerves of steel. She responded beautifully. The photograph is in the recess behind the sliding panel just above the right bell pull. She was there in an instant, and I caught a glimpse of it as she half drew it out. When I cried out that it was a false alarm, she replaced it, glancing at the rocket, rushed from the room, and I have not seen her since. I rose, and, making my excuses, escaped from the house. I hesitated whether to attempt to secure the photograph at once, but the coachman had come in, and he was watching me narrowly. It seemed safer to wait. A little precipitance may ruin it all. And now? I asked. Our quest is practically finished. I shall talk with the king tomorrow, and with you, if you care to come with us. We will be shown into the sitting room to wait for the lady, but it is probable that when she comes she may find neither us nor the photograph. It might be a satisfaction to His Majesty to regain it with his own hands. And when will you call? At 8 in the morning. She will not be up, so that we shall have a clear field. Besides, we must be prompt, for this marriage may mean a complete change in her life and habits. I must wire to the king without delay. We had reached Baker Street, and had stopped at the door. He was searching in his pockets for the key, when someone passing said, "Good night, Mr. Sherlock Holmes." There were several people on the pavement at the time, but the greeting appeared to come from a slim youth in an ulster, who had hurried by. "I've heard that voice before," said Holmes, staring down the dimly lit street. "Nor I wonder who the deuce that could have been." I slept at Baker Street that night, and we were both engaged upon our toast and coffee when the King of Bohemia rushed into the room. "You have really got it," he cried, grasping Sherlock Holmes by either shoulder and looking eagerly into his face. "Not yet. But you have hopes." "I have hopes." "Then come, I am all impatience to be gone." "You must have a cab." "No, my brougham is waiting." "Then we shall simplify matters." We descended, and started off once more for Briony Lodge. "Irene Adler is married," remarked Holmes. "Married? When?" "Yesterday." "But to whom?" "To an English lawyer named Norton." "But she could not love him." "I'm in hopes that she does." "And why in hopes?" "Because I would spare your Majesty all fear of future annoyance. If the lady loves her husband, she does not love your Majesty. If she does not love your Majesty, there is no reason why she should interfere with your Majesty's plans." "It is true, and yet, well, I wish she had been of my own station. What a queen she would have made." He relapsed into a moody silence, which was not broken until we drew up in Serpentine Avenue. door of Breeding Lodge, the door of Breeding Lodge was open, and an elderly woman stood upon the steps. She watched us with a sardonic eye as we stepped from the brougham. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I believe," she said. "I am Mr. Holmes," answered my companion, looking at her with a questioning and rather startled gaze. "Indeed. My mistress told me that you were likely to call. She left this morning with her husband by the 5:15 train from Charing Cross for the continent." "What?" Sherlock Holmes staggered back, white with chagrin and surprise. "Do you mean that she has left England?" "And never to return." "And the papers?" asked the king hoarsely. "All is lost." "We shall see." He pushed past the servant and rushed into the drawing room, followed by the king and myself. The furniture was scattered about in every direction, with dismantled shelves and open drawers, as if the lady had hurriedly ransacked them before her flight. Holmes rushed to the bell pull, twirled back the small sliding shutter, and plunged his hand, pulled out a photograph and a letter. The photograph was of Irene Adler herself in an evening dress. The letter was subscribed to Sherlock Holmes, Esquire, to be left till called for. My friend tore it open, and we all three read it together. It was dated at midnight of the preceding night, and ran in this way. "My dear Mr. Sherlock Holmes, you really did it very well. You took me in completely. Until after the alarm of fire, I had not a suspicion. But then, when I found how I had betrayed myself, I began to think. I had been warned against you months ago. I had been told that if the king employed an agent, it would certainly be you, and your address had been given to me. Yet, with all this, you made me reveal what you wanted to know. Even after I became suspicious, I found it hard to think evil of such a dear, kind old clergyman. But, you know, I have been trained as an actress myself. Male costume is nothing new to me. I often take advantage of the freedom which it gives. I sent John, the coachman, to watch you, ran upstairs, got into my walking clothes, as I call them, and came down just as you departed. Well, I followed you to your door and made sure that I was really an object of interest to the celebrated Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Then I, rather imprudently, wished you good night, and started for the temple to see my husband. We both thought the best resource was flight when pursued by so formidable an antagonist, so you will find the nest empty when you call tomorrow. As to the photograph, your client may rest in peace. I love and am loved by a better man than he. The king may do what he will without hindrance from one whom he has cruelly wronged. I came only to safeguard myself, and to preserve a weapon which will always secure me from any steps which he might take in the future. I leave a photograph which he might care to possess, and I remain, my dear Mr. Sherlock Holmes, very yours truly, Irene Norton, née Adler." "What a woman! Oh, what a woman!" cried the King of Bohemia, when we had all three read this epistle. "Did I not tell you how quick and resolute she was? Would she not have made an admirable queen? Is it not a pity that she was not on my level? From what I have seen of the lady, she seems indeed to be on a very different level to your Majesty," said Holmes coldly. "I am sorry that I have not been able to bring your Majesty's business to a more successful conclusion." "On the contrary, my dear sir," said the king, "nothing could be more successful. I know that her word is inviolable. The photograph is now safe as if it were in the fire. I'm glad to hear your Majesty say so. I'm immensely indebted to you. Pray tell me, in what way can I reward you?" "This ring." He slipped an emerald snake ring from his finger and held it out upon the palm of his hand. "Your Majesty has something which I should value even more highly," said Holmes. "You have but to name it. This photograph." The king stared at him in amazement. "Irene's photograph?" he cried. "Certainly, if you wish it." "I thank you, Majesty. Then there is no more to be done in the matter. I have the honor to wish you a very good morning." He bowed, and, turning away without observing the hand which the king stretched out to him, he set off in my company for his chambers. And that was how a great scandal threatened to affect the kingdom of Bohemia, how the best plans of Mr. Sherlock Holmes was beaten by a woman's wit. He used to make merry over the cleverness of women, but I have not heard him do it as of late. And when he speaks of Irene Adler, or when he refers to her photograph, it is always under the honorable title of the woman. He's mad he got played. That's what it really is. He's just mad he got played. Hi, Wasabi! It's not the Book of Eli, it's Sherlock Holmes. But yeah. He's mad he got played. Oh, I love that. I love that. That was funny. That was funny. Hi, Wasabi. How are you doing today? How is you doing today, buddy? I'm glad that you made it. I think I'm gonna end the reading for right now. Still got a little time before the stream ends, so we can talk and chat and chill. How are you doing, buddy? How are you doing today? I hope you are doing well. I hope you are doing well. I am doing well. I started late, and then my computer decided it wanted to update as I was getting everything ready, so it took me a while. But yeah, I'm just here. I'm chilling. A little tired. The weather is god awful. I'm good. Got off a GTA session. Nice. Nice. That's awesome. Just finishing up the last of my coffee. I am tired. I thoroughly enjoy reading the Sherlock Holmes books. We got a few more. We definitely have a whole bunch more stories to read before we finish the book. I think let me double check how many more we have after this one. Read the index. Got 5 more stories we could read. So we'll have another couple of weeks of Sherlock Holmes to read before we start a new story. So yeah, nice. I haven't picked out another book yet to read after Sherlock Holmes, but since we have another couple of weeks of stories left over, I'm not gonna worry too much about it. I haven't played GTA in a while. I don't even know if it's still on my computer. GTA is kind of fun, but I haven't played it in a while. I haven't played anything in a while. I love Sherlock's home. That is very cozy. I'm sure. I haven't played any games lately. I've been playing Breath of the Wild, but in terms of other games, I haven't really been playing much of anything. I've just been existing lately. Which is weird to say. I don't know. I'm not feeling 100%. It's the weather, because today is like a very humid, hot, rainy day. I don't do well in this kind of weather. It makes my energy levels go right down the toilet. I played it on my PS5 with a friend and the other update that came out. Nice! Nice. Yes. Speaking of games, tomorrow we're gonna be continuing with The Hangman. We might even be finishing it up tomorrow, which is gonna be very. If we end up finishing it tomorrow, it's gonna be very bittersweet. I'm gonna be sad because I actually love this. I actually love these games, the Strange Men games. So it's like I'm a little sad that it's almost over. It's almost done. But then of course we can always start on new stuff, and I've been looking into new games on Steam. Not new games really, but like things to play and stuff like that. So The Hangman, yeah. And then of course Friday is gonna be Deponia with Cal. I've really been enjoying Deponia, so I've really been enjoying Deponia, so I'm looking forward to playing it again on Friday. And then of course tomorrow, The Hangman. If we finish The Hangman tomorrow, then I think next week I'll do a drawing stream, which I haven't done in a while. I haven't done a drawing stream in a while, so I'm definitely gonna do that next week. Yeah, I reckon it'll be the last stream for The Hangman. Yeah, and I'm hoping I did everything right so we get a good ending. I'm hoping I did everything right so we get a good ending, because I want to make sure we have a good ending. I am exploring everything vigorously. I am making sure that everything is done exactly the way it needs to be done. So, hopefully. But yeah, I think next week I'll do a drawing stream. I haven't done one in a while. It'd be fun. It'd be nice to be able. It'd be nice to do one. We haven't done one in such a long time. It'd be nice. What am I gonna draw? I have no idea. No clue. None whatsoever. But no, it'll be. But yes. So. But I'm just. I have low energy. I have low energy today, which sucks. It does suck. I don't like being low energy. I guess today was the perfect day to do a story time because I'm a lot calmer right now. I'm a little low energy, so it's a lot calmer. Even with the coffee, I'm just like, ugh. But yeah. So, thank you everyone so much for coming here. Thanks so much for hanging out. I will be seeing you guys. Oh my god, excuse me. It's been pretty fun having you guys here. Been pretty keen for your drawing streams. It's been a while. Yeah, it's been a while. So next week I'll do a drawing stream. Like I said, if I finish doing the Hangman tomorrow, then yes, next week we'll be doing a drawing stream. I haven't done one in a while, so it'll be nice to have a nice chill drawing stream. Just hang out, talk shit, all that fun stuff. It's been a while since we just sat down and talked shit. While doing a little bit of artwork, a little bit of doodling. Thank you all so much for coming out and hanging out with me. Thanks so much for listening to my story time. Tomorrow is gonna be the Hangman. I am excited. I hope that I'll wake up on time tomorrow to do the thing. And yeah, I love you guys. And remember, hug your friends, tell someone you love them, and be a force for good in the world, because goodness knows the world needs more goodness. I will see you tomorrow for more of the Hanged Man and, little silly, goofy shenanigans. Alright, I love you guys so very much, and I will see you guys tomorrow. See you guys. Bye!